So, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Science Students Playbook, a podcast brought to you by the UNB Science Student Leadership Peer Mentors. My name is Anajose. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm going into my 4th year of biology.
My name's Madelynn, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm going into my 2nd year of psychology.
And my name is Bailey. I also go by she, her, and I am entering my 4th and final year with a biology major.
Yes, and today we will be discussing productivity and well-being in the context of being a university science student. So I'll hand it over to Bailey, who's going to start us off.
Great, thank you. So we're about to dive into a topic that's near and dear to every student's heart, time and productivity skills. As science students in university, we know that balancing classes, labs, assignments, and perhaps even a part-time job or volunteer work can be overwhelming. But fear not, we're here to share some insights and tips to help you master the art of managing your time effectively while still enjoying your university life to the fullest. So let's kick things off. Anajose, could you share with our listeners one key aspect of time and productivity that has worked well for you as a science student?
Yes, I would say that my number one thing is to-do lists. I love to-do lists. I use my notes app. I have that little bubble button where you just check it off, and it's so satisfying. I love to make to-do lists, and they just keep me organized, so yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that's a great tip. And Madelynn, how about you? Any particular strategies that has helped you stay on top of all your commitments?
So at the start of each day, I plan out approximately how much time I will allot to each course. Because sometimes I find if I don't do this, I'll lose track of time and I'll spend too much time on one course, so I use timers to keep myself on track.
Yeah, those are some fantastic insights. Now let me share a few tips that have personally helped me manage my time and productivity as a science student. First and foremost, I make sure to set aside dedicated time on weekends where I don't touch any work or school-related tasks. It's essential to have a mental break and recharge for the upcoming week's challenges. Remember, burnout is the enemy of productivity. Another crucial aspect is maintaining a steady sleep schedule. Our brains function optimally when you get enough quality sleep. By sticking to a routine, I find that I'm more focused, efficient during my study sessions, and overall more productive. Before bedtime, I always allocate at least an hour for leisure activities like watching a show or reading a book. This wind-down period helps transition my mind from academic stress to relaxation mode, making it easier to fall asleep peacefully. I make sure to also meal prep my food each night, and I find that meal prepping in the morning just doesn't work for me. I would find myself half the time not packing lunch, and then I would essentially end up buying food on campus or uptown, which obviously wasn't good for the bank account. Mm-hmm. One thing that has been a game changer as well for me is setting aside time every Sunday to plan out my upcoming week. I typically use sticky notes on my desktop to outline my classes, work, volunteering, appointments, and dedicated study time. I include pretty much everything if I'm being honest. I can visually see my week at a glance, which helps me prioritize and allocate my time effectively. It also brings me peace of mind that I won't forget anything as I constantly update and check it throughout the week. And now, as we wrap up my section of today's episode, I want to emphasize the importance of these strategies. Effective time management is not just about squeezing in more tasks. It's about creating a balanced and sustainable routine that ensures our success as science students without compromising our well-being. You know yourself best. Only do what you know you can comfortably manage, and make sure to set aside time for yourself. This is just as important as dedicating time to study. I would say that this is my most important piece of advice in terms of productivity. As for time management, find an organizational system that works best for you. After all, there's nothing like buying a brand new agenda and color coding your daily schedules.
Okay, well, thank you, Bailey. That was very helpful. And so now we'll move into my section of today's episode, and I'm going to be discussing productivity strategies and tools. So the first thing on my list is where to study. So finding the perfect place to study can be tricky at first, but if you do find this perfect place, it'll enhance your ability to concentrate, learn, and be productive. So again, the best place of study can be different for everyone, and it depends on your learning style. Personally, I prefer to work in an isolated environment because I'm easily distracted by others, and I use any excuse to stop working. So the most productive study spaces for me tend to be my desk at home, or if it's nice outside, I love to go sit outside on a bench. So Bailey and Madelynn, can you give our listeners some examples or maybe your favorite place to study?
I'll start. I obviously really like the libraries on campus, just purely convenience, I guess. I don't have to get in my car and drive somewhere extra. I'm already here for classes, so I will tend to stop in at the library in between classes to study. I think my favorite spot on campus, if I'm looking to study by myself, would be the 5th floor. So you can book these on the UMB library website, and I tend to book a couple hours, and it's just a nice and quiet spot to get assignments done and do some memorization if needed. And otherwise, I have a cozy spot in my house as well. So in the evening, if I'm home, I will study there.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to go to the bio link in between the physics building and the biology building. I find it's a great place to study because it's usually pretty quiet, and it's a great place to get some sunshine and be around some plants even in the dead of winter.
So true. Yeah. And just another thing about the study spaces and the study rooms you can book, they get booked up very fast. So just so you know, helpful tip, you can book them a week in advance. So make sure you head on to the website on Sunday and you can book your study spaces for the week. Other places that I suggest studying would be maybe coffee shops, because some people like white noise and some people need treats to keep them motivated, so that's a great space to find on campus, or coffee shops downtown as well. And just library common spaces in general. The science library has a quiet zone and a silent zone, so depending on what you're looking for, the science library has it all basically. So now moving on, once you've found your perfect place to study, how do you study? So again, this is super reliant on finding your own learning style, but I have some tips that we can all apply no matter what your learning style is. So I'm sure that the peer mentors would agree not to cram and to definitely plan ahead. So once you get your syllabus, write that down in your calendar. Set yourself reminders like, this is when I need to start studying, a week in advance, things like that. So don't leave it till the last minute. I know it's hard to not procrastinate, but in the long run, it's the best thing for your grades and for your mental health. Another thing is to always ask for help. There's no point in studying and just getting to a topic that you don't understand and then being like, well, I hope this isn't on the test. Just reach out, send an email to your prof, ask your peers. There's nothing wrong with asking for help, and in the end, it'll help you get better grades. Always take breaks and reward yourself, so don't study for like hours and hours on end without like a snack break or a bathroom break. Like, that's really unhealthy. And also remember to reward yourself like you're doing great. Like, no matter how much you study, if you study for 15 minutes and if you concentrate for an hour, it doesn't matter. Like, reward yourself, take a break, take a nap, like buy yourself something nice, whatever. Another thing is to not just reread your notes. This is a very common mistake I think people make when studying, is just rereading your notes. You're not really studying, you're just kind of reviewing, and you're not putting the things you've learned into practice. So I highly recommend finding a different study method besides that. And my last tip would be to set goals for yourself. Don't just start studying without a game plan, because this will lead you to study for hours and hours without a stopping point. I recommend maybe picking a specific topic that you want to study that day, picking like a lecture or two that you want to review. That really helps me to not go overboard with the studying. So finding your learning style requires trial and error. Overall, there are 3 different learning styles that I've learned about. That is the seer, so a visual learner, a doer, which is someone who learns by doing, and the listener, someone who learns just by listening. So you have to figure out which one you are, and there's no one way to figure this out. You have to know yourself, and you know yourself best. So just think back to how you've been learning so far, and I'm sure you'll know whether you prefer to rewatch lectures, or if you prefer to do flashcards, or if you prefer to study with your friends. You know yourself best, so just think about what's going to help you, not just what's most convenient or what your friends are doing. So personally, I'm split between all 3 learning styles, so I'll give you a few of my own study strategies. I'm a doer, so I love to make study guides for myself. So I make my own questions based on the lecture material, and then I answer them myself. And then I can use these questions to keep quizzing myself throughout the semester, and then by the end of the semester, I have study guides for all modules, so I can study for the exam easily. I'm also a listener and like a visual learner, so I like to rewatch old lectures and look up YouTube videos that can re-explain the concepts using more simplified language or like animations. So that's how I like to learn. Madelynn and Bailey, do you guys know what learning style you use?
Yeah, well, for me, I kind of have a backstory with this. So, since being fully remote in my first year of 2020, and for most of my second year as well, I have had to change my study techniques and routines numerous times throughout my undergrad. And because of this, now that I'm entering my fourth and final year, I'm finally confident that I found a technique that works best for me when studying material that was delivered in person. Now, I know this is harder said than done, but I do dedicate at least an hour every single day after classes where I solely go over class material. I find that this helps to retain information, and it is easier when studying for a specific midterm or exam. When I start studying for long periods of time, I find setting a timer works well. I usually study for 45 minutes straight, and I make sure not to go on my phone and try my best not to get distracted. Then I will do 15 minutes off. So this time is dedicated to grabbing a snack, using the washroom, going outside for a few minutes, or checking my phone. I find that this system keeps me on track and motivates me to get through 45 minutes for my break.
I find that what works for me is self-testing, so kind of like Anajose said. In all my courses, after every lecture, I go through all the content and I create lists of questions that correspond to lecture material. And so this way, before quizzes, exams, and midterms, I already have prepared review questions that I can use to study instead of having to do that all right when I'm trying to study.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to not cramming. So like you've been prepared all semester, so you're ready to study and it's not super overwhelming. Yeah, those are some great strategies. Thank you guys. And so now I'm going to move on to what tools. So this is our last segment for my part, but I just want to say that I personally prefer to type my notes on my computer while I'm in lectures, just because for me it's faster and I can go back and edit easily. And also Control F is a big help when I'm reviewing material. So if you don't know what Control F, it's just a function on your computer where you can find keywords. And I'm sure most of you know about that, but it's actually surprising how many people don't know about it. And it's super helpful. You can even use it in your lecture slides. So when I study for a test or exam, I actually tend to prefer using paper and pencil because it kind of mimics what it would be like to actually write an exam or write a test, and I find that it helps me memorize better. Other people like to take notes on their iPads or directly onto paper, so again, that depends on your learning style, what you like best, what's most convenient to you, or what is available to you. There's no right or wrong way to take notes. If you're lucky, you might have the lecture slides ahead of time, so you can annotate on those if you have a printer or if you have a computer or if you have an iPad. But the trick is to stick to writing things down that your prof is saying out loud. Don't just write down what's already on the slide because you'll have access to that either before or after anyway. And also don't panic if you don't have the slides beforehand because this is more common in upper year courses where profs will not give you the slides beforehand. Don't worry because there's ways to retain information just by listening and by taking notes in class if you don't have the slides beforehand. Of course, some people do require this accommodation and that's perfectly fine. So if you do require the slides beforehand, check with the Student Accessibility Center to make sure you get those. And so now I want to talk about digital tools. So how do we stay organized? How do we keep track of deadlines and test dates? Of course, some people prefer like the pen and paper planner and agenda, which is perfectly fine if you like that. Personally, I use the Google Calendar app, so I input all my important dates as soon as I receive any syllabus from any class. I set reminders and alarms for myself to tell myself when to start studying. And again, I mentioned this earlier, but I love to-do lists, so using the Notes app to just organize my day is how I stay on track day to day. Two apps that I like to use for flashcards are Quizlet and Anki. I recommend these highly, and Quizlet you can use on your computer or on your phone. I think Anki is just a computer app, but it's really cool. It uses spaced repetition, which is like a technique that presents your flashcards depending on how well you know them. So I use this for like exams and like just like quick flashcards where you only need to learn like the term or something. For writing my notes on my computer, I use Microsoft OneNote. I don't use an iPad or a tablet. I know a lot of people do, but I guess I'll ask Bailey and Madelynn because I know you guys have iPads. So what apps do you guys use?
So I use Notability. I actually started using this I think halfway through my third year, actually. I did use OneNote for the longest time on my iPad, but I found that it just wasn't working for me anymore based on the classes that I was presently taking second term or third year. So I decided to switch it up. I had a friend recommend Notability to me. I think it's about $15 a year. So it's not too bad, but it has lots of great features and it works really well for me.
I tend to use GoodNote as my main note-taking app. I think it's $12 a year, or you can buy the actual app, which is a bit more expensive, but the subscription is $12 a year, and there's lots of good features on it, like you can color code and you can copy if you're like kind of writing the same thing over and over again. So I find that has worked for me.
Cool, yeah, those sound really nice, and I've seen you guys' notes and other people's, and they just look really aesthetic. So if that's something you're into, definitely consider an iPad or a tablet. And my last tip for all of you is to use the Do Not Disturb function on your phone. Like, for me, that is a game changer. You can set it, I have an iPhone, and I know you can set iPhones to have like focus mode or work mode, where you can allow certain text from like maybe your mom or your parents or like your email. So if you need important notifications to come through, that's fine. But don't let those like distracting Snapchat or Instagram notifications come through while you're trying to focus. So yeah, use Do Not Disturb on your phone. All phones have it, right? Like Android, Apple. So yeah, that's my number one big tip in terms of digital tools. And now I'll hand it over to Madelynn to talk about resources on campus.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to start off by talking about the UNB Curry Center. I'm a big advocate for physical activity throughout the school year because I find it really helps keep my stress in check, and it helps with my mental health. So the UNB Curry Center has strength training machines, cardio machines, free weights, a track, and 2 gymnasiums. So your U card actually acts as your gym membership, which is great because you're already paying for your gym membership with your tuition, so that's super helpful. Red's Rec, which is kind of the program at the Curry Center, also offers fitness, mindfulness classes, and personal training sessions, but these have extra costs associated with, but you will get them cheaper because you are a member. So that's a place where I definitely spend a lot of time throughout the school year, and I find it very helpful. Another resource on campus is the UNB Student Accessibility Center, also known as the SAC or SAC, and this is to help students with disabilities succeed academically. So I go to the SAC and I find it very helpful. Everyone there is super nice. But to start, you can book an intake appointment by going on their SharePoint page, which is called Accessibility Fredericton. And so the SAC is used for students with chronic and acute disabilities, so you'll have to get a letter from some type of medical professional, and then you will book your intake appointment, and the learning strategist or your accommodation contact will help you come up with a plan and what resources you need. Another awesome resource on campus is the UNB Counseling Services, which is in the C.C. Jones building on the 2nd floor. And they offer therapy services that are free to all full-time students. So you can go on SharePoint and search up UNB Counseling Services, and you can book an intake appointment. And there's lots of great counselors there that are very well trained and can help you with a lot of things. 2 more groups that I'm going to talk about are the Positive Mental Health Team and the Mental Health Association. And they're 2 groups that are committed to improving the well-being of UNB students. So they're always looking for volunteers as well, if that's something you guys are interested in. I'm now going to move on to talk about some book recommendations about productivity and well-being. So the first one I'm going to talk about is The Power of Habit. So this discusses the scientific evidence behind how habits lie behind most of our daily decisions, actions, and behaviors. So habits are simply one of the ways that the brain conserves energy, and cravings are at the root of each habit, which is something that the author talks a lot about. And they believe that the key to success is changing bad or unproductive habits into good and productive habits. So this is a great book to read if you're looking for some extra resources to go along with this podcast. There's also the book Thinking Fast and Slow, and the author believes that there are two main systems of thought, which they call the fast system and the slow system. And by delving into each system, you can better understand why you make the decisions you do, and this can help you to make academically helpful decisions.
Thank you, Madelynn. So that brings us to the end of episode 2 of the Science Student Playbook. We thank you for listening, and make sure to keep checking back on the Peer Mentors SharePoint page for further episodes. Thank you. Bye.